My childhood sweetheart was a straight-A genius, cold, distant, completely out of everyone's reach. The year of the college entrance exams, he lived up to every expectation and became the top scorer. From then on, everything went his way, success after success. Fame and achievement coming easily. At a class reunion years later, the former school beauty, now married, got drunk, half laughing, half on the verge of tears. She said, "Luciano, the genius, has such a bright future ahead of him." No wonder he rejected my confession back then. For the first time ever, his usual calm composure cracked. After a brief pause, his gaze turned sharp, demanding, as it locked onto me. I explained, "You said those love letters didn't need to be given to you, that I could just throw them away." He had nodded back then and said nothing more. I thought that was the end of it. But that very night, the people he brought broke my hands. The blows of the sticks landed hard, a piercing pain shooting through me. He stood off to the side, his expression dark and unreadable. "How does it feel?" he said coldly, "to have something you care about casually destroyed by someone else? This is the price you pay for ruining what we could have had." With just those 2 sentences, my newly successful dream of becoming a designer was completely shattered. When I opened my eyes again, I was back on the day I held the school beauty's love letter. Chapter 01. Rose. Are these all the love letters for the genius today? And tell me, what kind of girl do you think someone like him even likes? My desk mate stared curiously at the stack of letters in my hands as she spoke. Hearing her voice, I snapped back to reality. Cold sweat slid down from my temples. The pink envelope stabbed at my eyes. Without realizing it, I tightened my grip, my fingertips turning pale from the force. These meaningless things were the reason my hands had been destroyed. Thank God I was back. Seeing me stare at the letters in silence, my desk mate grew concerned and gently patted me. "Rose, what's wrong? Are you feeling sick?" Suppressing the hatred and turmoil surging in my chest, I turned to her and forced a smile. "I'm fine, just spaced out thinking about something." Seeing that I was indeed okay, she let out a breath of relief. Then she glanced at the letters again and shook her head. "What a waste. All of these are just going straight into the trash." I held the envelopes tighter, my expression dimming, thinking about what happened in my past life. I let out a silent, cold laugh. "Throw them away? No, these things should be returned to their rightful owner." I straightened the stack in my hands, placing the school beauty's letter right on top, making sure it would be the first thing anyone noticed. Then I turned and placed the letters on the desk behind me. That seat belonged to Luciano. He wasn't there at the moment, but when he came back, he would definitely see them right away. My desk mate looked at me in surprise, clearly confused by my sudden change of attitude. I smiled and said, "After thinking it through, I feel like it's better if he decides for himself. This isn't really my business, I shouldn't interfere." She paused for a moment, then nodded. "When you put it that way, yeah, that makes sense." Chapter 02. By the time the long break was almost over, Luciano, who had been called to the teacher's office, returned to the classroom. He saw the stack of love letters on his desk, his handsome brows knitting slightly as he called my name. "Rose." But right after saying it, his voice faltered. With my back to him, I rolled my eyes, forcing down the disgust I felt, then turned around and put on a polite front. "What is it?" He didn't answer me. His gaze fell on the letters, emotions churning in his eyes. The neatly written name Camila brought a visible shift to his expression. After a long moment, he reached out and gathered the letters, his tone calm. "It's nothing." Seeing the faint upward curve of his lips, I understood immediately. He was happy, he'd gotten something from the girl he liked. The more I looked at that smile, the more nauseating it felt. In my previous life, Luciano had acted all aloof and above it all, impatiently asking me to deal with his love letters. He said he didn't want trivial things like that to interfere with his studies. He quietly rejected his admirers, while conveniently allowing them to endlessly bother me instead. Because our families were close, I thought it was just a small favor. I didn't think much of it and sacrificed my own time to deal with his trash. And then, once he became successful, he told me he regretted it, that because of me, he had missed the one true love of his life. After regretting it, he didn't blame his fake arrogance. He didn't blame his own stupidity. Instead, he destroyed my hands, making me pay for his so-called pure love. The sheer hypocrisy of it made me sick, wanting everything while pretending to be above it all, utterly disgusting. Back then, we were in our final year of high school. The workload was overwhelming. We were exhausted every day from studying. I could never have imagined that something this trivial would become his excuse for revenge. If I hadn't gone through what he did to me, I would never have known he was such a vile person. You were the one who told me not to bother you with those love letters. And in the end, you had the nerve to blame me, saying I didn't remind you, that I made you miss her. What? Was I supposed to read your mind? How would I know that among hundreds of letters was the one from the girl you actually cared about? I'm not your damn mother. Why should I handle all your nonsense? Even in my past life, I was already annoyed dealing with those letters. I'm not your personal dumping ground. I had my own studies to focus on. If it weren't for the relationship between our families, I would have thrown those letters straight in your face instead of letting them pile up in my drawer every day. I didn't provoke you, didn't wrong you. I followed your instructions and got rid of the letters, and you still found a reason to ruin my hands. Unbelievable, completely deranged. I didn't want to look at him anymore, so I withdrew my gaze and turned away. Luciano, you resented me. You pinned all the blame on me and destroyed my dream. In this life, I'll give you exactly what you wanted, the love letters. Let's see. When your future and the school beauty are placed in front of you at the same time, which one will you choose? Chapter 03. After school that night, I didn't wait for Luciano. I left on my own. If he wasn't heading home with me, then he was definitely going to meet someone. Thinking back to how, in my previous life, the school beauty had said with a bitter smile at the reunion that she had waited a long time for him that day, I let out a soft, mocking laugh. Since they were clearly into each other, getting together would be perfect. I'd heard the school beauty wasn't exactly great at studying. If she could drag that delusional jerk Luciano down with her, I'd be even happier. With the original timeline altered, I went to the mall in a good mood, only to run into someone who absolutely shouldn't have been there. I'd underestimated this whole situation. Just as I was about to push open the door of the stall and leave, I heard a somewhat familiar voice. A love letter? I only wrote it as a joke after losing a bet. Luciano isn't even my type. Oh please. That letter would never reach him anyway. I've seen it. His childhood sweetheart always handles those for him. Forget about him. Boring. The soft, teasing voice rang out. My hand froze on the door, and my expression turned cold instantly. It was Camila. Listening to her casual, almost mocking tone, my face grew colder and colder, my hands curling into fists. Originally, I had felt a bit guilty toward her. In my previous life, she had looked so heartbroken in that private room. I had even doubted myself because of what she said. I thought that maybe, if I hadn't interfered in their story, they wouldn't have missed each other. So even though I hated Luciano, hated him enough to want him dead, I never once thought about ruining him in this life. I figured that as long as I stayed out of it, everything would be fine. After all, for Camila, that regret had seemed real. But what about now? Camila knew from the very beginning that the letter would never reach him. She did it on purpose. Everything she said back then, those vague, misleading words, were lies. She never liked Luciano at all. I looked down at my unscarred hands, pain flashing through my eyes as memories from my past life surged back. Even now, I could still feel it, the twisted, piercing agony in all 10 fingers. I could still hear every word Luciano said when he made me pay the price. If it weren't for you, I'd be the one married to Camila. If it weren't for you, I'd be the father of the child she's carrying. Rose, this is what you owe us. Even losing your hands, you'll never repay it. One of them secretly in love but too cowardly to act. The other treating feelings like a game, stringing someone along without care. Something that had absolutely nothing to do with me. And yet I was the only one who paid the price. 2 complete lunatics. And they destroyed me. The angrier I became, the calmer my mind grew. In my last life, you destroyed the thing I cared about most. This time, I'll return it to you. Twice over. Chapter 04. I went home alone. Mom served me dinner and asked with concern. Luciano still hasn't come back. Do you know where he went? Of course I knew. He was waiting for the girl he liked at the park near the school. That's what I thought. But I simply shook my head. looking puzzled. I don't know. He didn't leave school with me tonight. Mom nodded and sighed. That child is usually so well behaved. What happened today? I didn't respond. After finishing my meal, I went straight back to my room. When Luciano Su was finally found, it was already past midnight. My mom said he had caught a chill. As soon as he got home, he developed a fever, and Uncle Su drove him to the hospital that night. The moment he returned to school after being discharged, he cornered me in an empty spot and questioned me. He still looked pale from his illness, but his eyes were sharp as they locked onto mine. Rose, did you say something to Camila? After asking, he studied my expression closely. I almost laughed from sheer irritation and met his gaze without holding back. No, what does this have to do with Camila? Who even is she? Why would I have anything to say to her? My expression was completely open. He hesitated for a moment, then asked again. The girl who asked you to pass on the love letter. I rolled my eyes, growing impatient. At least 5 girls ask me to pass you letters every single day. Am I supposed to remember each one? His gaze faltered slightly, and he fell silent. A chill flickered in my eyes. I shook off the hand he was holding me with and said coldly, who knew helping deliver a love letter could still cause problems? That's new. I let out a mocking laugh, rubbing my wrist where his grip had left a mark, and looked at him with indifference. If that's the case, then maybe you should go tell your admirers yourself, not to dump their trash on me anymore. I'm not a recycling bin. Luciano watched me rubbing my wrist, a flicker of guilt passing through his eyes. But when he heard me call those letters trash, he frowned, his voice turning low. I misunderstood you, but what you said was too much. Too much? I sneered inwardly. So now it was too much? If I didn't spell it out, would he ever realize how much trouble his admirers caused me every single day? Thinking about how he had so casually burdened me with handling his letters in the past, only to later act like a lovesick victim and make me pay for it, I clenched my teeth in anger. Too much? Luciano, I just realized today how interesting you are. Your admirers bother me every day, taking up my study time. You act all high and mighty, toss out one impatient sentence telling me to deal with it, and that still takes up my time. This has been going on for nearly 3 years. I'm not your mother, and I don't owe you anything. I helped you out of goodwill, and now I get blamed for it, and I'm not even allowed to say a few harsh words? Luciano's expression darkened instantly. He stared at me, wanting to argue, but everything I said was the truth. He had nothing to refute. If you're really a man, then you should go ask the person who actually upset you, instead of taking out your anger on me. I was never someone easy to bully. The misplaced guilt I once felt vanished completely after hearing the truth from Camila. Now, all I cared about was studying hard and paying back double everything I suffered at Luciano's hands in my previous life. Seeing the stunned look in his eyes, I let out a cold laugh and turned away without hesitation. Chapter 05. From that day on, Luciano's admirers stopped bothering me, and I was finally able to live my school life in peace. He and Camila didn't end up dating. After I snapped at Luciano, he really did go to talk to Camila privately. Nothing came of it, but from that day forward, Luciano changed. I don't know what Camila said to him, but he started to rebel. He stopped doing homework, slept through classes, and didn't go home at night. It was also around this time that I began to understand what Camila was really like. She looked gentle and well-behaved, but her actions were the complete opposite. She ranked at the bottom in exams, never studied seriously, and spent most of her time in nightclubs, bars, and karaoke lounges. She lived for fun, treating life like a game. Luciano had never truly mattered to her. Someone like her was exactly the kind of person Luciano used to despise. But at this age, that contrast became irresistibly attractive to him. Luciano chose to approach her on his own and sank deeper and deeper. Very quickly, there was nothing left of the untouchable, high and mighty genius he once was. They made no effort to hide it. Luciano's performance in class declined rapidly, and soon, both he and Camila were called into the teacher's office. It happened during the long break, and many students gathered around to watch the drama unfold. From inside the office came the teacher's scolding and attempts at persuasion, along with Camila's aggrieved voice denying any relationship. The crowd outside grew even more excited. Students whispered among themselves, eagerly explaining the situation to those who didn't know. From their chatter, I learned what Camila had said to Luciano. Because of my deliberate outburst, Luciano's pride had been triggered, pushing him to approach Camila first. At the time, Camila had acted remorseful. She told him she wasn't good at studying, that she regretted sending the letter, and didn't want to ruin his future, so she chose not to show up. After hearing that, Luciano said he understood her. He even offered to tutor her, but Camila refused, saying she simply wasn't cut out for studying and that he should forget the whole thing ever happened. And just like that, Luciano, the boy who had always been number one, chose to fall. Also that he could stand beside her as an equal. Also that Camila could feel at ease being with him. He gave his heart willingly. Even today, when the teachers demanded that he cut ties immediately and refocus on his studies, he flatly refused. The teachers were furious, but they couldn't bear to give up on such a promising top student. So right there, they called both families and asked them to take their children home for discipline. When the office door opened, Camila walked out with a faint smile, completely indifferent, as if being called in by her parents meant nothing to her. Her gaze swept through the crowd and landed on me, her expression turning playful. She tilted her head slightly toward Luciano. The look practically said, "Oh, look, the one who tattled is here." Luciano still carried that cold aura, but there was now a reckless edge to his demeanor. Following her gaze, he looked at me, frowned, and a trace of disgust surfaced in his eyes. I watched as the two of them effortlessly shifted the blame onto me. A flicker of confusion rose in my heart. I truly didn't understand. This had absolutely nothing to do with me. So why was it that they always managed to drag me into their game? Why? Chapter 06. Something flashed through my mind, and my eyes darkened slightly. Was it because of that so-called childhood sweetheart label everyone at school loved to joke about? I looked at Luciano, his brows furrowed even deeper, and he immediately turned his head away, avoiding my gaze, as if trying to keep his distance so Camila wouldn't misunderstand. There was even a trace of irritation on his face. So it really was because of that. That just made it even more ridiculous. No matter how much people at school gossiped, I had never believed it. I had never thought there was anything between Luciano and me beyond friendship, and I always assumed he thought the same. Now I realized just how wrong I had been. No wonder he had been so ruthless to me in my previous life. He thought I had deliberately sabotaged his relationship with Camila out of selfish motives. That narcissist actually believed I liked him. Disgusting. I looked at the smug, provocative glint in Camila's eyes and felt like I had swallowed a fly. Two awful lunatics using me as a prop to push their relationship forward. The nausea was so strong that I couldn't even force a smile at them. When my desk mate and I returned to class, their parents had already arrived at school. Mrs. Sue's eyes were red as she scolded Luciano Sue. Luciano kept his head down the entire time, not daring to look up. On the other side, Camila had it much easier. An elegant, well-dressed woman said a few words before taking Camila, who looked completely indifferent, away from the school. My desk mate Amy watched for a moment, clicking her tongue several times. After class, she turned to me with a look of regret. "Your childhood sweetheart is definitely going to get his heart broken." We had grown close over the past few days, and she knew there was nothing going on between Luciano and me. So she spoke freely. I asked curiously, "What do you mean?" Amy lowered her voice. "Camila is the second daughter of the biggest real estate family in the city. I've heard she's going to end up in a business marriage someday. You and Luciano were always buried in your studies, so it's normal you wouldn't know things like this. She's dated quite a few people before, as long as she doesn't go too far. Her family doesn't interfere. She's used to treating relationships like games. She's never been heartbroken after a breakup. Luciano won't be anything special either." I nodded after hearing that. Exactly. Why would Luciano think he was the exception? I had never interacted with Camila before, so it made sense I didn't know, but Luciano had been hanging out with that crowd. There was no way he didn't know about her past relationships. If he chose to fall for her anyway, then he had no one to blame but himself. The clearer things became, the more I despised Luciano's character. Someone as smart as him, how could he not have known, in my previous life, that Camila would never be able to refuse a business marriage? He knew, but he couldn't change it. So I became the outlet for his anger. Accepting this calmly, I lowered my head and smiled faintly. I was curious. This time, I wanted to see how the top-scoring genius Luciano would manage to protect his so-called love. Chapter 07. When I got home, my parents were both waiting for me in the living room. They first tried to probe me indirectly about Luciano's relationship. When they saw I had no reaction, they let out a sigh of relief, then immediately launched into a lecture about the dangers of teenage romance. I listened, half amused, half exasperated. Only after I repeatedly reassured them did they finally stop. Satisfied, Mom handed me my phone. It rang several times today. Check who messaged you and reply. They told me to reply, but made no move to leave. Their eyes full of suspicion. I understood. What happened with Luciano had clearly alarmed them. They were afraid I might end up the same way. I turned on my phone, glanced at the screen, and the smile on my face vanished instantly. Rose, you were the one who told the teacher, weren't you? You're disgusting. The message was from Luciano, sent half an hour ago. Seeing my expression darken, my parents asked, "What's wrong?" I took a deep breath and turned the screen toward them. The moment they read it, my mother's face visibly darkened. My father looked equally furious. I said calmly, "They've been so high profile at school that it'd be hard for teachers not to notice. I don't even want to get involved in their business." No matter how close the two families were, my parents couldn't tolerate me being wronged and insulted. So when I stood up, ready to go next door and confront him directly, they followed without hesitation. When the door opened, Mrs. Sue looked a bit worn out, but when she saw us, she still forced a smile. To be honest, she had always treated me very well. So well that even in my previous life, when Luciano had hurt me without regard for my parents' feelings, trampling me into the ground, I had never once thought about taking my anger out on them. But now, with Luciano's repeated arrogance and self-righteousness, I had no choice but to come and make my stance clear. Otherwise, he'd just assume I wouldn't dare confront him in front of our parents and keep pushing his nonsense onto me. I couldn't allow my tolerance to become his excuse to keep hurting me. I took out my phone first, pulled up the message, and showed it to Mrs. Sue. Under her shocked gaze, I gave a bitter smile and said, "Auntie, I think there's been some misunderstanding between Luciano and me." After a moment of silence, we were invited inside. When Luciano was called downstairs, the shock was still written all over his face. He looked at me with wounded eyes, as if no matter how he insulted me, I had no right to bring it to the parents and make him lose face. I sneered inwardly. He needed a reality check. Keeping my tone calm, I spoke. "Last time, when you grabbed my wrist and hurt me because of a misunderstanding involving one of your admirers, I already told you, don't take out your unresolved anger on me. I'm not your punching bag. I don't want to get involved in anything between you and Camila. It has nothing to do with me. But since you sent me that message, I think it's necessary to clear things up in front of everyone. I wasn't the one who reported you. I'm busy studying every day. I don't have time to pay attention to this kind of nonsense. And more importantly, the teachers aren't blind. They know perfectly well that you've been skipping classes and sleeping through lessons." Luciano's expression darkened, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. After a long pause, he finally spoke hoarsely. "I understand. I'm sorry. I misunderstood you." There was something strange about his expression as he turned and walked upstairs. Mrs. Sue looked ashamed, her eyes red as she apologized to us. My mother, seeing that I had already made Luciano lose face on my own and gotten my point across, quickly stepped forward to support her. "It was just a misunderstanding, nothing serious. Now that it's cleared up, let's not dwell on it." Chapter 08. On the way home, my parents were unusually quiet. Just when I thought they wouldn't say anything, my dad spoke first. "Rose, stay away from that boy from the Sue family from now on. He has no sense of responsibility, lashes out recklessly, and his temperament is far too unstable." My mom nodded in agreement. "That's right. No matter how talented he is, if his character is flawed, it's all for nothing." I nodded repeatedly. They were absolutely right. He was completely unhinged. Nothing like a normal person. From that day on, Luciano never contacted me again. When he finally returned to school, it was already 3 days later. I heard from my parents that his family had been trying to persuade him, but he refused to listen. Just the night before, he had gotten into a huge argument with them over breaking up. even angering his mother so much that she had to be taken to the hospital in the middle of the night. Not only did he not go with her, he took advantage of the lack of supervision at home and came straight back to school. He was even more flamboyant than before, an earring in his ear. His once neat school uniform replaced by a flashy leather jacket. He drew attention everywhere he went. The moment Camila saw the bold, striking Luciano outside the classroom, a spark of interest finally lit up in her eyes. Maybe she found it entertaining, or maybe she was captivated by someone willing to give up everything for her, to act recklessly without restraint. Either way, Camila officially entered into a relationship with Luciano. Before, they had kept things somewhat restrained at school, only acting out by misbehaving in class. But now, with Luciano by her side, Camila began bringing her off-campus habits into the school. They smoked, got into fights, and even found amusement in intimidating younger students. The disciplinary dean called them out by name multiple times. When Luciano showed no signs of remorse, the decision was made to remove him from the advanced class. Our homeroom teacher, deeply disappointed, didn't object. No matter how promising a student he once was, she couldn't risk letting him stay in the same class as us. She was afraid he would affect the others. I focused on my studies, reviewing my lessons, aiming for an even better score. At the same time, I was waiting for the right moment to close the net. Chapter 09. Since my house is close to the Sue families, I could hear whenever something big happened over there. After staying out all night for an entire week, Luciano Sue returned home and got into another intense argument with his parents. His mother threatened to cut off their parent-child relationship unless he went back to being his old self. But Luciano didn't care at all. He said if they wanted to cut ties, then so be it. He was done living that boring life. He slammed the door and left. After he was gone, his mother was so furious that she ended up in the hospital again. She stayed hospitalized for 2 days, and Luciano didn't visit even once. The child they had raised with so much effort had turned into someone who didn't care about their well-being at all. His parents were completely heartbroken, and from then on, they stopped interfering with his life. Luciano fully let himself go after that. He dyed his hair a flashy red and spent his days cruising around with Camila. They held hands, hugged, kissed. On the surface, their relationship seemed great. But one day, a major piece of news broke. Camila was seeing 2 people at once. She had also gotten involved with a bartender. Luciano got into a fight with someone, and that very night, something else happened. In any case, Camila broke things off with him. That day, when they were arguing at the school gate, Camila cried as she slapped Luciano across the face, then ran off immediately. By coincidence, I happened to be nearby at the time and saw everything clearly. Luciano, who always carried himself with arrogance and pride in front of me, stood there with a swollen cheek. His expression darkened for a moment, but in the end, he hurriedly chased after her, watching him sink deeper and deeper. I curled my lips into a faint smile. This incident had caused quite a stir. The young master of the Wong family, who was supposed to enter a marriage alliance with Camila, would probably find out soon enough. Sure enough, just 2 days later, when I returned home at night, I saw Camila crying miserably outside the Sue family's house. I kept my eyes straight ahead, pretending not to see anything, and walked straight inside. Then I hid at the corner of the 2nd floor, listening to the commotion outside. Crying, Camila grabbed Luciano, making a scene. "It's all your fault. My engagement has been called off. Are you happy now?" Sob. I could have married into the Wong family clean and proper, but now that chance has gone to my cousin. Even my parents have kicked me out of the house. Luciano's voice was hoarse. I had been drinking that day. I was just too angry. He paused briefly, then continued. This time, there was an unmistakable hint of excitement in his voice. "Camila, trust me. I'll take responsibility for you. I'll treat you well from now on, I promise." They embraced each other, becoming intimate as if no one else was around. Listening from the shadows, I let out a cold, mocking smile. So when his temper got the better of him, Luciano had forced things. No wonder Camila had been abandoned by her family so quickly. The Camila family and the Wong family are both major business families. They value profit above everything else. Camila doesn't do well in her studies and has no particular strengths. Her greatest advantages are her good looks and the affection of the Wong family's young heir. Now that she had crossed the line into a real physical relationship, it was no longer some trivial flirtation. Someone as proud as the Wang heir would never accept her anymore. Once her engagement was cancelled, she lost her final value. Her family discarded her without hesitation and replaced her with another girl. I shook my head, my eyes filled with ridicule. I had even prepared several backup plans to deal with them, but now it seemed I had overestimated them. They didn't need any effort from me at all. They had already ruined themselves completely. Chapter 10. Ever since Camila was abandoned by her family, she no longer dared to act as arrogantly and domineeringly as before. Back when she was proud and overbearing, she had bullied and offended quite a number of people. Now that she had lost her backing, those same people began waiting for her at the school gate every day. Without powerful support behind her, her courage shrank as well. She was so frightened that she didn't even dare go to school anymore. Taking advantage of the fact that Luciano Su's parents were away on a business trip, she stayed at the Su house during this time. Their positions flipped dramatically. Before, Luciano Su had been the one desperately chasing after her. Now, she was the one clinging tightly to him, refusing to let go. Having grown used to a luxurious lifestyle, she had no intention of living a low-quality life with Luciano in the future. She began urging him to focus on his studies and improve himself. Luciano had only just begun enjoying his newfound freedom, so of course he resisted. He refused at first, but in the end, he couldn't withstand Camila's persistent pleading and returned to school. He studied seriously, even regaining some of his former drive. But this time, there were people who didn't want him to succeed. The classmates he had once bullied alongside Camila for fun began to target him together. Those students who had previously been suppressed by Camila's family power and had no outlet for their anger now vented everything on him. Even official warnings and disciplinary notices from the school administration had no effect. Luciano's life had become extremely difficult. Once, he had been the admired academic genius of the school, but ever since he fell into bullying others at will, he had turned into nothing more than a delinquent capable of all kinds of wrongdoing. The halo he once despised had been torn off by his own hands, and the reckless freedom he had longed for now made him pay a heavy price. He would suddenly slip and fall while getting food. Homework he had completed would mysteriously disappear, and he would even be locked inside the restroom at times. Most of what he and Camila had once done to others was now being repaid to him. With Camila absent from school, he was completely isolated. No one was there to help him. At first, he tried to fight back, but over time, he grew increasingly silent. Once, I even saw him come home drenched from head to toe. The long-term suppression, combined with Camila urging him to improve every day, just like his mother used to, finally led to an argument between them. I stood on the balcony in the cold wind, listening to the sounds of dishes shattering all over the floor from the Su house. Along with their fierce quarrel, they blamed each other, hurled insults back and forth, and in the end, it concluded with Camila breaking down in tears while Luciano gave in first and tried to comfort her. Unable to endure being targeted any longer, Luciano chose to study at home instead. He and Camila stayed wrapped up in each other all day at home, while she continued to push him to study. Chapter 11. When Luciano Su's parents returned from their business trip and pushed open the door, they walked right into the sight of the two being intimate. Their faces darkened instantly. As the owners of the house, they drove Camila out and loudly scolded them for being shameless. The commotion drew the neighbors out, but Luciano's parents didn't care about saving face at all. They berated the two of them mercilessly in front of everyone. I stood at a distance with the others, watching the spectacle. Luciano said nothing, standing in front of Camila protectively, his face alternating between pale and flushed. After his parents had vented enough, he finally spoke in a calm voice, dropping a bombshell. Camila is pregnant. Mom, Dad, she has nowhere to go. You can't drive her away. His parents were stunned, and so was I. No matter how unexpected it was, shouldn't normal people at least know how to handle something like this properly? This was just absurd. Thinking back to how Luciano had once begged desperately for what he couldn't have in my previous life, I raised an eyebrow. Well, now he would get both things he had once longed for. After the shock passed, Luciano's mother looked at him with complete disappointment. Her expression turned calm as she grabbed her husband's arm, stopping his rising anger, and spoke. Luciano, you're grown up now. We can't control you anymore. From now on, do whatever you want. We're cutting ties. She pointed at the house behind her, her gaze cold. "We'll leave this house to you. As for everything else we own, it will all go to your sister. From now on, there's no need to see each other again. We'll live with her." Luciano's pupils shrank as he stared at her in disbelief, but she didn't look at him again. Together with his silent father, she pulled their suitcases and turned to leave. By the time Luciano snapped out of it and tried to chase after them, his parents had already gotten into a taxi and left. He stood there blankly, his expression dazed. The murmurs and pointing from the surrounding crowd became too much for Camila to bear. She hurried forward and grabbed at Luciano, but for the first time, he avoided her touch and walked silently into the house. Camila froze in shock for a moment, then clenched her teeth and quickly followed him inside. I was surprised by how decisive Luciano's parents were, but after thinking about it, I realized it was the best possible outcome. Luciano always acted without considering anyone else's feelings. Completely self-centered, someone like that was bound to disappoint them to the core sooner or later. Now, things had simply reached that point. Chapter 12. With the college entrance exam approaching, I became even more focused on my studies and stopped worrying about Luciano Su altogether. He hadn't studied for a long time, but given his intelligence, getting into a good university still wouldn't have been a problem. However, based on what I had found out recently, I didn't need to interfere. Someone else would make sure things didn't go smoothly for him. My parents stayed by my side, nervously accompanying me while I studied. They kept reassuring me not to be anxious, telling me that as long as I performed normally, it would be fine. Watching them so tense that they even put on the wrong slippers, I ultimately didn't have the heart to tell them that I wasn't nervous at all. After the exams were over, I finally relaxed and began paying attention to what was happening around me. Amy seemed to have done well. With a cheerful smile, she told me she was sure she could get into the same university as me. I smiled back and congratulated her in advance. The next second, her smile faded, replaced by a hint of regret. Luciano didn't take the exam this time. Sigh. An entire generation's academic genius has fallen. I didn't know how her information network was so fast, but that didn't stop me from asking. When she heard my question, she glanced around cautiously before lowering her voice. The day before the exam, his hand was broken by someone, I don't know who. I heard it was badly injured, all bloody, and a passerby took him to the hospital. That's why he missed the exam. I understood immediately and couldn't help but laugh inwardly. Was this karma? In my previous life, Luciano had destroyed my dreams. In this life, at the most critical moment, his hopes had been destroyed by someone else. Thinking it through, I might even owe some thanks to the ruthlessness of the Wong family's young master. Not only did this outcome satisfy his desire for revenge, it suited me perfectly as well. I smiled and turned to her. Forget about him. We've finally been freed. How about we go on a trip to relax? Amy's eyes lit up, and she immediately nodded in agreement. Chapter 13. When I came back again, it was already a month later. The admission letter had arrived, and I still chose the same university as in my previous life. The final wish I didn't get to fulfill in my previous life, I want to achieve it this time. Ever since my parents found out that I did very well on the exams, they immediately started traveling everywhere. No one was at home, and this time I came back mainly to pack up my things. They had bought an apartment near my university, and we would settle there in the future. We probably wouldn't come back here much anymore. Busy with their travels, they urged me to come back and pack and move. I also wanted them to relax and enjoy themselves, so I agreed to handle everything on my own. I just didn't expect that my return would be so ill-timed. I ran into someone I least wanted to see. After not seeing him for a while, Luciano had changed a lot. He looked disheveled, his eyes bloodshot, as if he hadn't had a good night's sleep in a long time. When he saw me, he froze for a moment, then quickly walked toward me. As he got closer, he seemed a bit uneasy. Only after 2 or 3 seconds did he react, putting his hands behind his back and forcing a smile at me. Long time no see. I had actually noticed the way his fingers were twisted and deformed, but I didn't say anything. I just smiled and nodded. I didn't want to catch up with him, I just wanted to go home as soon as possible. Luciano seemed to notice this. His expression grew a little awkward, but he still didn't move aside. He stayed silent for quite a while. Just as I was becoming very impatient, he finally spoke with a bitter smile. Rose, I've actually regretted it all this time. Even now, I keep thinking, if that love letter hadn't been placed on my desk back then, would things have turned out differently? I froze for a moment and looked up at him. He didn't seem to notice and continued talking about his recent experiences and suffering. It had been a long time since I had heard anything about him. I had been moving forward in my life. After getting my revenge, I left him behind completely. The only one still trapped in past memories and pain was Luciano. I stayed silent, listening to him speak. He said he couldn't get in touch with his parents. He knew he was wrong, but there was no way to fix it. He said Camila was an ungrateful wretch, that he had given her so much, even ruined his own future. Yet she had simply run away and left him. I watched as he talked about how he was wrong, yet still blamed everything on others. And I wasn't surprised in the slightest, because Luciano was exactly that kind of selfish person. He only ever thought about himself and never truly reflected on his own actions. All his misfortune clearly involved his own choices, yet he never believed he was truly at fault. There was nothing to say to someone like that. The best thing to do was stay far away. After pouring everything out, Luciano looked at me in pain. Rose, if only you hadn't put that love letter on my desk back then, how great that would have been. Chapter 14. Heh, no matter what you do, you can never satisfy someone like him. Even after being reborn, he still had that same pathetic attitude that everyone had misunderstood and let him down. I looked straight at him, let out a cold laugh, and said with sarcasm, so you regret it now. You want to get back the brilliant life you once had, and then you'd be dissatisfied again, thinking you lost the one you loved and ruined my hands, right? He looked at me with a pale expression. So this is your revenge? Because I hurt you? He brought out the hand he had been hiding behind his back and showed it to me. I glanced at it and immediately laughed. You're wrong. I didn't do this. I simply did as you wished and put the love letter on your desk. I'm not that bored. I wouldn't waste time on you. I have a lot of things to do and not that much time to target you. He stared at me for 2 seconds, then gave a bleak smile and nodded. I understand. Sorry for misunderstanding you. After apologizing, he turned and left. I watched his back for a long time. The next day, he died. He slit his wrists. Before he died, he updated one last post on his social media. I regret it. I want to go back. I don't want love anymore. When I saw it, I only felt it was meaningless. How could someone who is selfish to the core ever find happiness? Thinking back to what he asked me yesterday, whether it was my revenge, I curled my lips into a faint smile. I didn't exactly lie to him, but what I said wasn't entirely the truth either. At the bar they often went to, I posted fake recruitment ads and lured in several men who matched Camila's type. I only set the stage. I never expected Camila to actually fall for it, and the one she got involved with just happened to be her ex-boyfriend. That's all I did. It hardly counts as revenge. They were simply too eager to destroy themselves. What fault could possibly be mine?